Welcome to the December meeting of the Australian Zonta Says NOW think tank. My name is Carol Theobald and I'm speaking to you today from the very hot lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Western Australia. I'll be hosting today's meeting with the help of Bernadine Guy in New South Wales, Sue Lees and Sandra Burns in Victoria, and Petra Ladwig in Queensland. The theme of today's meeting is Standing Up for Climate Justice. I quite like that kangaroo. I thought he had a nice look on his face. Anyway, this is our program for today. But before we begin, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. Please say hi in the chat and tell us where you are calling from today. And please use the chat line to make comments. Keep your microphones on mute. Ask short, succinct questions and use welcoming and inclusive language. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Sandra in Melbourne.
Thanks, Carol. It's not quite as warm over here in Melbourne. I think we're finally maybe getting some summer, though, I have to say. I'm just checking. I think, yes, Nicki's just come in. I'd like to remind you that Wednesday, the 10th of December, was the last day of the 16 days of activism to end violence against women, and also the Human Rights Day, and also my grandson's 5th birthday. In honour of Human Rights Day, we'd like to share Photography for Humanity, a UN photographic competition that brings the power of human rights to life through images. The photos show courage, despair, hope, injustice, and compassion. From the 31 photos on the site, we've created a video of 14 that highlight life for women and children in today's chaotic world. They're very moving, and it's a reminder as to why Zonta says now and why it exists. There's no sound, as we want you to focus on the photos.
Recording in progress.
Well, now, thank you for putting those photos together, Carol. Now for our formal welcome. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in all the places that we're meeting from today and pay our respects to our elders, past, present, and emerging. And today I would like to acknowledge Maisie Harkin. Maisie was born on country in the West Australian goldfields. She was taken to a mission when she was only 2 and had no formal records to support her date and place of birth. Over the years, Maisie made many attempts to get a birth certificate, and recently, with the help of some researchers, she was successful. Her identity was confirmed through anthropological records. In her adult life, Maisie worked as a nurse around Australia. However, without a birth certificate, she could not get a passport, so she could never travel overseas. As Maisie says, I am somebody now. Maisie's story is not unique. In the last 6 months in Western Australia, 164 Aboriginal people over the age of 50 have had their births registered. This situation shows that we still have many human rights gaps in our country. I'm pleased that Maisie now has her birth certificate, but it's so sad that she had to wait 88 years to get it. So, do you think that the gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people would be closed if we knew each other better? In our first poll, we asked how many Aboriginal people, how many you know socially. Sorry. Is it none, less than 5, between 5 and 10, or more than 10? Let's see what you're putting in. Okay, so, the first results are there now. So none, 43%, seems to make sense to me. Less than 5, 36, 14%, 5 to 10, and more than 10, only 7%, which is one of the 14 people who are sharing today. Now we have a second poll. Do we want to have our second poll, Carol?
Yeah.
Our second poll asks how many Aboriginal people you have spoken to in the last week. Is it none, less than 5, between 5 and 10, or more than 10? Okay, so 50% haven't spoken to an Indigenous person in the last week, and that includes me. Less than 5 spoken to is 43%, so 5 to 10, 7%, and more than 10, none. So in that 7%, there's only one person who'd spoken to 5 to 10, and 6 people less than 5. So thank you for sharing those results, but I think it highlights how we're not very connected to the Indigenous people in our communities.
Mm.
And so, given that knowledge and what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to hand over to Sue Lees.
Before we do that, Sandra,
Yeah.
I just want to note in the chat that
okay.
Petra has pointed out that not everyone who is Aboriginal may choose to share that identity with all, which is a very good point. So we may be someone who identifies as Aboriginal, but we're not aware of it. But that's a good point.
That is a very good point. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Over to Sue.
Right.
Over to Sue.
Thank you. So also in recognition of Human Rights Day on the 10th of December, we have Nicki Lees, and you can guess the relationship, is Special Counsel at Maurice Blackburn Social Justice Practice. And Nicki is going to talk about the cases she has run that champion gender equality, women's rights, and climate justice.
For our discussion today, we will look at how we can support Indigenous women as individuals and in our clubs. We'll put you into breakout rooms to discuss 3 topics. 1, how can we advocate for support in our local communities? And what can each of us do in our everyday actions to support Indigenous women? How can Zonta clubs incorporate Indigenous women in our projects, partnerships, or advocacy? We will ask each group to provide one advocacy idea and one personal or club action during the report back. Carol's going to now divide us into our rooms.
Yeah, I think we're all back. Super. Okay. We had two groups in the end, and so I'm going to ask Sue Lees to give us, I gather you were taking some notes from your group, and Sandra, if you could give us a summary from your group. Sue, did you want to start off? I hope you enjoyed that little discussion anyway.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic actually having a good discussion with everybody. And so the first task was one advocacy idea. And we actually very sensibly decided that we need to step back, that we probably as a pretty Caucasian women's organization, we actually need to step back and listen to the women. We need to get to know the women. We need to yarn with the women. We need to learn their stories and how they perceive the world. And then basically we can start doing what they want us to do, because sometimes that might be quite different to what we're actually thinking in some ways. So I think we need to acknowledge our own lack of learning and in that space and act on that. So the Zonta Club of Melbourne on Yarra has done things like had a forum about Indigenous women hear their voice. We do now have an Indigenous Young Women's Award, which District 24 has as well. But even with those things, we need to be cognizant of not just supporting perhaps the student who wins, but also the other students who apply, and seeing whether we can create any connections with them, and that to kind of build up our knowledge as well and our relationships. There's things like at the annual marches against violence towards women. I actually went around and noted the Indigenous associations so that we may be able to form some relationships with them in the future. And in terms of the club action or the personal action, obviously the personal action is wanting to learn yourself and not be the one who knows all the time. But I think Bernie actually had a fantastic idea for the club action, which is District 24 does have their Young Women's Leaders Award. But we were discussing the idea of not only trying to keep up with the applicant who wins, but the others. They actually had 24 applicants this year, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's growing. And I think that is great news. The girls do want to do it themselves. So yeah, be prepared to take time, be prepared to think differently, and yeah, we have to look for opportunities too, because we don't necessarily mix always in the same circles, and we've got to be aware of that and acknowledge that, and bring to the story what we can ourselves to help them.
Yeah, that's good. Sandra, did you want to summarize what your group was talking about?
Yes, well, I was just going to talk about our club, but now Sue's done it, so people in my group will know what they did. So that's very good. Thank you, Sue. So yeah, we had a discussion, really started off about treaty, because in Victoria we now have treaty and there will be elections, so certain people will be elected to be sort of giving information when the government wants information on particular lands and things. One would hope that's going to go well. So the treaty might open opportunities for us to say, how can we support people? But Christine spoke about, in South Australia, they've tried very hard to engage, but she was mentioning something was which a lot of people probably don't realize, but the Indigenous communities are sometimes quite small and they get a lot of requests to speak or to respond. And she was talking about how sometimes for some Indigenous people that could be an overwhelming number of requests to actually, respond to things that the white community want to know. So I thought that was a really good point. Annabelle spoke about her the situation in Canberra and said, well, their club doesn't do anything, but a number of people that she's involved with got involved in active democracy as a result of the referendum, and they want to know, well, what could they do? And so so this is aside from Zonta, but they have gone out to a number of Indigenous groups and said, look, what are the issues? What could we possibly do? You tell us what support you would like from us. And they brought up a couple of issues where she and other people, they were able to lobby a number of ministers and campaign and add to the campaign that the Indigenous groups had about a sporting ground and a farming situation in Canberra. So that was quite good. Kay spoke about the difficulties of being in an E-club, because they only have 12 and probably only half of those are active members, and they're right across Australia. So that's been difficult for them, but not that they haven't done anything. Kay's daughters are very involved, both of them, in work with Indigenous groups. But I think the real message there and an advocacy idea is to maybe just provide our support when there is an issue there, that we can be supporting that. We don't have the answers, we don't have the information, and on a personal basis maybe keep learning ourselves, keeping our ear to the ground, that listening how we can support these women and how we could give political support to them as well. Hopefully I covered most things there.
Brilliant. Nicki, when you were first meeting with the strong women that you met up with, did you have any tips for us on first contact, if you like?
Yeah, good question. So, to be honest, I just tried to be pretty humble about it. I mean, I got so many things wrong. Like I was so green when I started. Like I think I got, welcome to country and acknowledgement of country mixed up. And just, years and years ago, and they were just very graceful with me. And I think because I sort of said to them, look, I'm coming to learn from you in this. I have some legal knowledge and expertise and I can run a case for you. But I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in this area. So I think that worked quite well. It was difficult because sometimes you have to be the bearer of bad news too. So our legal system, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but our legal system really isn't made to protect Aboriginal cultural heritage. And so when you're looking at things like stories and cultural songlines, we don't have a great tool in the law to protect them. And so sometimes I would have to be that voice of the law and be that voice of oppression, and telling them that, like, I know that they desecrated your site, but we don't have a strong legal case around ABC. And that often would go down really badly. And I just had to take it. Because sometimes your role as a lawyer is to be able to deliver that bad news to people that they might not have a strong case in certain areas. So I really think it was balancing that professionalism with I'm coming in to be that. I was that intersection between white law and them. And sometimes that meant being incredibly humble and listening to their stories. And sometimes it meant being that person to deliver bad news around that the law wasn't a great tool for cultural heritage protection in Australia, and that's something that needs to change. Yeah.
When I was doing my internet backgrounding on you, Nicki, I came across that Exhibit AI project that you'd been involved with, where you were using artificial intelligence to provide imagery to support the cases of asylum seekers in detention. Now, I was wondering, because that really gave you the graphics that could actually come through to tell a story. Now, when we're sort of learning more about Aboriginal stories, so many of the things they can't show or share because of cultural limitations. Is there an opening for perhaps using that AI approach to overcome some of these barriers to communicating the issues that Indigenous people have?
Yeah, it's something that's fascinating. So I'm a massive believer in storytelling as a way to communicate justice. One thing, I mean, I've been working in human rights law now for 10 years in Australia, and one thing that I'm really quite convinced on is that the law is often the worst tool, like litigation is often the worst tool to end up in. Um, and I think, yeah, Carol, I mean, very quickly, that storytelling example, while it's refugees and not First Nations women, I work with a lot of refugee women. That's kind of for 10 years, that was my area. And what we did is we took testimony from those, and look, the majority were women. And because there was no cameras allowed on Nauru, we said, well, let's take all your court documents and your stories and put them through an AI program, and then let's have that as a storytelling tool. And we did exhibits. We went to Canberra. We gave it to, it ran on CNN in the US. It was on their front page. And this, I think the feedback around storytelling, this is just an example. I was chatting to one of the women really recently who actually mum's met her. And she was just such an incredible woman. Like I'm just so in awe of the sort of the re-traumatization that they go through, but they still do it for our benefit to share their story. The book that we created, that storytelling book with the AI images and what Nauru was like, she said that it's the last thing she looks at every night when she goes to bed. And when she's feeling really, traumatized, and when she's feeling really unsure about her, as a transitory person, she doesn't have a pathway in Australia. She looks at that book and she feels strong because she told her story. And the feedback that we got was the court process was great, like achieved something, but the storytelling and the images and the art, that was actually more powerful. And that was a kind of restorative justice that you don't get through the court system. And so I actually, Carol, just to come back to the First Nations point, so
Yeah.
I was involved in running the Northern Territory Youth Justice Class Action. So you would have seen all the stuff that came out about Dondale and putting the kids in Dondale. So we sued the Northern Territory government and we won $35 million for what happened to those kids. And what we did is that's great. We got $35 million for compensation for them. But when I actually sat down and had a yarn with those kids, and this comes back to consultation and sitting down and listening, they all said, to my colleague and I, like, great, thanks for the money, but we've still got scars on the brain. That's what they call them from Dondale. So actually, if you really want to help us as lawyers, can you come in and we can talk about the case and we can talk about what happened and we can all have a yarn. So we ended up, run it for 2 years now. I've been running basketball clinics in the Alice Springs Correctional Centre. And it's basically just come and play basketball. We'll have a bit of a yarn about the case. We have an Aboriginal organisation we partner with that's trauma informed. We have financial counsellors there. And we created this whole ecosystem of support based on that consultation with them, that it's well and all well and good to run a legal case, but that's not what those young people needed ultimately. It was $100,000 being put in their bank account. It was that ecosystem of support.
Yeah.
And when we sat in court, the day that it settled, and the Chief Justice of the Federal Court said, tell me your story, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the case half the time. And she gave that space to those young people to do a truth telling. It was one of the most, like, honestly, one of the most moving things I've ever seen in law. And it was so important to those young people to feel like they'd been heard. So I think that truth telling is, in my reflection from 10 years in this space now, one of the absolute most important things.
I've just got the exhibit AI open. I'm going to share the screen and just show a couple of the pictures so as people get an idea of what the AI generated imagery looks like. Okay, so I'll just go to like 14 here. It's not the real people, it's an AI representation of the people, isn't that right, Nicki?
Yeah, so no cameras were allowed on Nauru. It was part of the law that there could be no images shown to the world of what happened on Nauru. So one thing that was really important to people was that they created their own images of what Nauru was like and shared them with people. So we put all their stories into AI. They would look at the pictures, and for sometimes up to months, we'd go back and forth, and every single part of the image they would have control over and they'd give us feedback on. And we created a visual record of what Nauru was like. Yeah.
Man. It just there was just so many things in these stories, it was just I was very moved when I went through these. And anyway, I'd suggest that people go and have a look at them later on. But it's an amazing way of seeing, well, walking in someone else's shoes, you know. Yeah, as he fell out of it. You know, there's just so many different things. Anyway, I'll just put that off so as you can go and look at that later on. But it opens up possibilities, AI, in ways you don't expect, doesn't it?
It does. There's a lot of talk around the risks of AI and the negative things with AI, and there's 100% risks and negative things. But I think one thing that I've learned in my work is that for particularly say refugee women who might not want to show their face to something, or particularly, vulnerable people, AI actually presents a really interesting opportunity for them to share their story. And that's definitely the feedback that I've got from people, but it just needs to be done well. I've seen people do it where they just create images and send them out into the universe. So it really, again, has to be the person that's gone through the story, them having control over their story and the images that come out.
Oh, that's brilliant. Did anyone have any more questions for Nicki? Just check the chat line. Yeah. Some of these cases you've worked on have taken years and years. Where'd you get your patients from?
Oh gosh, I'll tell you what, it's been like, especially the refugee sector. It's been a slog and it's been hard. And one case we were working on for 5 years, and then it fell over 3 weeks before trial after 5 years. So it's about trying to be creative. So that Exhibit AI program, for example, came out of that case that fell over. So it was like if someone shares their story with you, you've kind of got an obligation to try to use it no matter what. So yeah, I think it's just trying to be creative in the process. And if litigation is just one pathway, like trying to always look at different options to engage policy or media or advocacy, and taking that multi-pronged approach, I think is what keeps us going.
Brilliant. Sue, you have a question.
Yeah, no, not so much a question. It's just, I think Nicki would agree that through her work, both she and I have experienced meeting some and having relationships with some really amazing women, both through the Indigenous work and the asylum seeker work. Yeah, women who you just absolutely take your hat off to for what they go through with life and how they cope with it. And maybe, Nicki, we can get you at some stage to do a talk for the club or something about the AI and the refugee women. That would be great. But my last comment just before we go is that if you do ever have a chance to go for a yarn with an Indigenous woman, it is the best experience in life. I have had that opportunity, and like I really treasure being, accepted and having the chance to spend some time with them. It's just brilliant in your life.
Brilliant. Quite agree. Quite agree. Thank you, Nicki, for opening our eyes to some of the realities that face these communities. It's been very illuminating. I'm just going over to, I think that was Bernie there. Okay, I'll just pass on now to some international news, which is what's been going on. Many of you would have seen the October Intercontinental Think Tank update, and the December update will be out next week. If you've not signed up for the update, you can do so from the Intercontinental Think Tank page on our Australian Zonta Says Now website. Our next Intercontinental Think Tank is on Sunday, the 11th of January at 11 Perth time, and 2 in the Eastern States, and is hosted by Zontians from Asia and Oceania. The theme is how can cities lead a just and climate resilient future? We're so privileged to have Huey Young and Krista Milne as our guest speakers. Huey leads the C40 Cities program in East and Southeast Asia and Oceania, rolling out the program in Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Bangkok, and many more big cities. Huey's got a Master of Science in Sustainable Cities from King's College London and a BSc in Psychology and Genetics from the University of Melbourne. So she's got local links, and she's fluent in 6 languages. Anyway, she's amazing. And the second speaker is Krista Milne. She's the Director of Climate Change and City Resilience and co-chief heat officer. There's only 9 of these in the world at the City of Melbourne. Krista protects communities from extreme heat and develops strategies to cool and heat-proof cities. She co-leads a team driving Melbourne's net zero by 2040 agenda and climate adaptation efforts. So the talk's timely, given it will be in the middle of summer. Anyway, the Intercontinental Think Tank for March will be a joint think tank and NGO CSW virtual event. The Zonta Says Now International Working Group will present a workshop on women in sustainable decision-making using our Zonta Says Now resources. And the event is timed to be accessible in Australia in our waking hours. So it's 8 p.m. there to 8:30 p.m. their time on the Thursday night, which is 11:30 a.m. Melbourne, Sydney time on Friday, the 13th of March. And also a heads up about the first Zonta Says Now walk at Convention in Vancouver. This will take place on Saturday, the 11th of July at 7 a.m. So when you register for Convention, you can order a Zonta Says Now t-shirt that you collect from the registration desk when your clients sign in. And we'll also be hosting a face-to-face workshop, and our July think tank will serve as a virtual event during Convention week for those that cannot get to Vancouver. So also entries for the 2026 collection of the Zonta Says Now Virtual Art Gallery are open, and entries received before the International Women's Day, the 8th of March, will be included in the 2026 collection launched on Earth Day. This photo from last year's collection made me smile, very topical. A Canadian Zontian took it on holiday in Florida. The snowman is made up of sandbags that are kept handy in case of floods. And this video has been made to promote the gallery. I hope you enjoy it. Touch something, sorry. Well, I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Good. I'll now hand over to Bernie to tell us what's happening in Australia.
Thank you, Carol. That was excellent. I really enjoyed that. The music was wonderful too.
Yeah,
Um, it is, isn't it? Yeah, and you always do them so professionally. Thank you. The exciting news is that Zonta Australia has been leading the drive to get a Gender and Climate Justice Day at Climate Action Week Sydney. We stressed to the Climate Action Week Sydney team that the event is so close to International Women's Day that it would be too good an opportunity to miss. They agreed and have given us the Great Hall at the University of Technology, Sydney, on Tuesday, the 10th of March, to create a full-day flagship event. We have formed a Climate Action Week collaboration consisting of 9 organisations so far and growing, and they are some big women groups in the news. On Tuesday, we held our first brainstorming session to figure out what we will be doing. Depending on the funds we can raise, we want to invite some international speakers and integrate the voices of Aboriginal and young women. At this stage, put the date in your diary and plan to be part of the event if you are anywhere near New South Wales in March. Climate Action Week Sydney is coming into its 3rd year, and it is a cousin to the events held in New York in September and London in June. If we do this right, we can really progress gender equal climate justice in Australia. We're also seeing if we can get the March think tank NGO CSW 70 virtual event advertised as a Sydney Climate Action Week event. This will be a great opportunity to showcase Zonta as a truly international organisation. Our November Australian update came out just as we heard that COP31 had gone to Tokyo. Australia will lead the negotiations and may hold a pre-COP Pacific conference. Hopefully, our actions through Climate Action Week Sydney will keep us in the loop for this event. Our next Australian think tank will be on Valentine's Day. Dr. Margaret Morton, the CEO of Gender and Disaster Australia, will be showing us how gender-smart disaster action can shape stronger, more resilient communities. Remember, you can expect Australian updates in odd-numbered months and Australian think tanks in even-numbered months. I'll now hand over to Sue.
Okay, I want to tell you about the District 23 Women Taking Climate Action awardee. And this year it is Sally Quinn, who is the co-founder and CEO of Green Collect. Now, since 2005, this social enterprise has reused, recycled, and repurposed about 150 tonnes of unwanted items each year. Sally prioritises employing people who are refugees, transitioning out of homelessness, or have been impacted by the justice system. Over 80% of the leadership team are female, and over 50% of all employees are female. Last year, Green Collect prevented 1,149,474 kilograms of CO2 emissions. That's like taking thousands of cars off the road, and they're very good at collecting their data. 17,318,158 MJ of energy saved, enough to power an entire suburb for a year, and 558,358 litres of water conserved by avoiding new production of goods. So every drop counts. We were talking about water before. So congratulations to Sally, and we will meet Sally in March when we present the award. And I'll now hand over to Petra.
Pardon me. I've been trying not to cough all the way through the meeting. So thanks, Sue, again. We're currently advertising our 2026 Women in Climate Action Award, and luckily, thanks to a bequest to the district, this is valued at $10,000. So I have so far sent information to, I think, 18 universities and educational institutions, another 14 organisations, from people working in reefs, CSIRO. I only started that last weekend, so I'm slowly getting replies saying, yep, thanks for posting your link. I haven't had a chance to go and see how many. It's sort of a process in most of these scholarship things at the unis. Just getting the information out there. Finding an email address is a challenge these days. But anyway, we are plugging on. So if any of you know anyone who you think might be good, feel free to share. It is on the District 22 website. Other things that are happening, I think we mentioned at the last meeting that Anjali Sharma, who's spoken at the think tank a couple of times here, has been nominated for a 2025 Human Rights Medal. And even being nominated is obviously a great honour. And through her efforts, the Australian courts are no longer questioning the science behind climate change. I'd like to think that's actually true. Our federal parliament has considered 2 bills to protect future generations from the impacts of climate change. Anjali has obviously also been a strong supporter of students from the Pacific Islands who successfully advocated for the advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice that confirmed that states have a legal obligation to protect the climate. So I was just Googling when I saw that. I was like, I need to look up who actually won this, as it was announced yesterday. Arunte Elder, William Tillmouth, has won that for his lifelong advocacy for First Nations. So that fits in very well with the theme of today's meeting. A member of the Stolen Generations, his work, which includes founding an organisation called Children's Ground, has been about ensuring future generations of First Nations children can exercise their rights and their voice. So that is very fitting in what we've been talking about today. So you can find, obviously, information on the Human Rights Award if you want to read further about this gentleman who sounds like he's done some great stuff. There he is, a photo of him. So, that's fantastic. A couple of our allies have been conducting surveys. So Sweltering Cities wants to know how you're faring, and 1 million women want to know how climate change is affecting you. So log on to their sites and give them a bit of information to work with. Without data, advocacy is almost impossible. So any of that would be helpful. On Monday, head of the Australian delegation to COP30 will provide a summary of key negotiating and climate agenda items. So there will be a Teams meeting, but it won't be recorded. So, yeah. Okay. Handing back to Carol. Thank you.
Thanks, Petra. That's great. So there's a few things that you can do today with those surveys, which is great. We've had quite a productive year. Do you remember our February think tank? We had the theme of elections offer more than a sausage, and we examined gender equal climate justice in Australia to prepare for the federal election. By April, we were heading into the unknown as we were seeing a global pushback against gender equality and climate action. And Carly Cook demonstrated how women were shaping the future of conservation. In June, we looked at what to do when something is not fit for purpose. In this case, it was our environmental legislation that doesn't consider climate change. And Mayor Farmer raised concerns about young people's lack of trust in the government's commitment to future generations, and she co-founded Generation Justice to address it. In August, we investigated the power of purposeful collaboration, and Fiona Dorman, the president of the National Council of Women, shared their work with the Women W20 group, which is the women's group which advocates to the G20. And Fiona subsequently also joined Zonta. In October, we explored nature-based solutions, and Charlotte Sterrett inspired us with the World Wildlife Fund's Powered by Nature project that empowers women throughout Southeast Asia. And today, we were standing up for climate justice with learning about Nicki Lees' work, which has been so impressive. And she's challenged us to build relationships with our Indigenous sisters. We've got a lot to look forward to in 2026. In January, we've got our Sustainable Cities Intercontinental think tank. In February, the Australian think tank focuses on generating smart disaster action to build stronger, more resilient communities. In March, we've got the NGO CSW in New York with the March Intercontinental Think Tank being streamed to Climate Action Week in Sydney. And for Climate Action Week, Sydney, we're also planning a Gender and Climate Justice Day with other women's groups. And in April, we've got the Women Deliver Conference in Melbourne, hosted by the Oceanic Pacific region. And we've also got a think tank that will feature Dr. Elizabeth Kirkwood, who looks at energy justice for women in our region. And we'll finish the biennium with the Zonta International Convention in Vancouver, where we'll have the first Zonta Says Now walk, as well as virtual and face-to-face workshops. Can you feel the energy? There's a lot going on. It's wee-haw! Anyway, before we move to our next meeting, is there anything in the chat, Sandra? Just double check. Our next meeting will be on Saturday, the 14th of February, and our guest speaker will be Dr. Margaret Morton, the CEO of Gender and Disaster Australia. Register today so the date is in your diary. And finally, thank you for making Zonta Says Now thrive in 25. And here's to continuing our joyful adventure in 2026. So enjoy your holidays and take time to absorb nature. So many thanks to Nicki, my fellow presenters, Sue Lee, Sandra Burns, Bernadine Guy, and Petra Ladwig, for all of you for making today's meeting so interesting. We had lots to think about, and hopefully you can't wait to get started on working more closely with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sisters in 2026. Together, we can stand up for climate justice. So I'll take my screen off share so we can all give each other a wave.
Thanks, Carol. Great,
Thank you.
great
Keep
meeting.
breathing, keep smiling, and have fun.
Merry
And I'll
Christmas,
see you
everybody.
next year.
Enjoy the
Thank
holiday.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.